This is Out of the Basement, a podcast dedicated to radiation medicine.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Accelerators podcast. We are here with Dr. Todd Scarborough, Dr. Jason Beckta, and one of the hosts, me, Simil Parikh, and we're here to talk about the workforce analysis that was recently published in the Red Journal. Jason, you want to talk about the study and the implications and why we're talking about this?
Yeah, I think this was quite an overwhelming undertaking on their part. So I know the three of us in particular, but Todd and I love to do this kind of in our spare time, and we can really appreciate how complicated doing this would be. ASTRO had did with an outside independent firm to help them with this and tried to figure it was at least over a year ago when this was announced and started working on it. A lot of the data was sourced, I think, in January 2022. But anyway, I think the paper is very dense. There's a lot of numbers that's forecasting complicated kind of economic models. And for at least today, we can ignore all of the assumptions about hypofrac and why they didn't include SBRT and inventing new sort of treatment indications and all these other things. Is really the only thing that matters is the workforce, at least as it extends, as it is today. And that matters because it's actually measurable. So everything else is forecasting the future. And the one thing we can at least try, and I think this is what I was most excited for, was to have an accurate measure of the workforce. And I think those of us who have paid attention to various publications over the last 5 years have seen that there's a pretty wide discrepancy in the numbers. And then if you play with the databases available, you can also derive several different things. You would think for such a highly regulated specialty, medicine in general is incredibly highly regulated. We're small. You would think we would have just a stone cold accurate number, but we don't. I guess just focusing on that. So if you read the paper, so it's important to remember the firm, HMA, provided ASTRO with the methods for how they made this model, which you can get as the supplement. So if you go to the Red Journal website, the supplement to the paper is the report as the consultants gave it to ASTRO. On the blog of ASTRO's blog, they have a tool, which is the actual file, the Excel worksheets that the consultants use to do all their other numbers. So ASTRO did not make that. That was given to ASTRO as an independent kind of outside firm. And then ASTRO, as we know them, wrote that editorial. So it's confusing, but so ASTRO did not make any of these numbers, but the paper is their kind of analysis of it. So if you read the paper in the first section, everything really anchors on the year 2019, which logically tracks. It's been pretty tumultuous and over the past few years, to say the least. And so 2019 is advantageous for a couple of reasons. One, all this data, all these big databases have a lag. So obviously it's 4 years now in the past. So enough time has passed that as much delayed data as can be collected has been collected. And then it also predates the COVID turmoil. I completely agree with anchoring on 2019, at least in terms of a set point. It's the logical move. In the body of the ASTRO paper, they write that it's about 4,718 in 2019. So, that right off the bat is lower than other estimates that we've seen. And even by some of the authors that are on this paper have themselves published competing numbers. To assume 4,718 in 2019, the other governmental department stuff, the AHRQ, I believe, by the Department of Health and Human Services, estimated 5,300 in 2017. If you go in the AAMC data, they're about 5,306 in 2019, and there's a couple different ways to slice it. So right off the bat, it's about 400 or 500 lower.
Can I interrupt, Jason?
Please.
The AHR data, are you talking about the geographic distribution workforce paper that Dr. Bates had previously co-authored?
Correct. So it's, if you pull up the 2020, that's the name of it, I believe. It was published in 2020, and it was looking at geographic distribution, and working with that AHRF data is difficult. So I'm glad they summarized it like that. Yep. That's in the 2020 Bates geographic paper.
Yeah. And so I think, just as a observer reading this paper for the first time, I think this number, that 4718, was in the abstract, and it says 4718 for 2019. And so you have authors on this paper who are pretty significantly contradicting numbers that they have published previously. And then other independent data like AMC and whatnot are saying like around 5,100 to 5,300 in the 2019 range. So this was the first red flag for me.
I would completely agree. So yeah, actually, because of that, I, being the nerd that I am, went and dug into the supplement and the Excel file. So if you read the supplement, which is the methods the consultants used, they describe an incredibly thorough methodology to basically verify as close as possible the 2019 numbers. So they access the CMS database that is publicly available. They, as many of us who've worked in these databases know, it can be confusing. It's not perfect. So any physician can bill for anything. So if you look for radiotherapy specific codes, sometimes things will show up that they're not radiation oncologists. But so they pulled the CMS data from 2015 to 2019. And I really like this part. So they developed 2 CPT groupings. So they asked what are the most radiotherapy specific codes possible. And they created 2 5 CPT code groupings to algorithmically search the CMS database to capture this data. Doing so, they returned just shy of 5,600 NPIs. Now, this is where it gets confusing. So it took me a little bit to realize this. That 5,600 number is the total of unique NPIs from 2015 to 2019. So it's only a sum. So it does not capture any exits, but that's how many of us NPIs appeared in that window. Then they acquired a commercial database called Statisan, and that independently accumulates commercial claims for 140 million Americans. They report that they had acquired that database specifically from 2019 through 2021, so a 3-year period. They cross-referenced those 2 databases. So again, they have CMS from 2015 to 2019, the commercial database from 2019 to 2021. So the only overlap for verification is 2019. In the year 2019, there are about 5,157, I think, and unique NPIs that show up in both. So that's they either show up in both or they show up in one or not the other. So it's 5157. In that, there are some that show up in just the commercial and some that show up in just the Medicare. So there are 5,011 unique NPIs showing up in 2 independent databases in 2019 using this very kind of elaborate 2 CPT code algorithmic grouping search mechanism. I love that. I thought that was incredibly thorough because I've done this as well, and it's very hard to search these databases. So I think cross-referencing 2 massive databases using algorithmic CPT codes is pretty great. But
can I interrupt?
Yes.
One more thing. Is there a possibility, given that some practices have a group NPI, and I know you're always supposed to put an individual's NPI in, but I'm not sure that's done 100% of the time, especially for maybe new physicians that are just entering. Do you think that should get you to 99 to 100%? Because I have a sneaking suspicion, given the group NPI thing, it may not get us to 99 to 100%. What do you think?
I agree. So it might actually get to 99 now. So if you go to, and I encourage everyone to do this, if you go to the CMS database tools, which we all can access, search 77427, which is the 5-fraction OTV code for 2019. If you do that, and you can download that as an Excel file, there are actually, it's 5,131 unique NPIs billed 77427 in 2019. Of those 5,131, only 4 groups or organizations.
Really?
So at least in that setting, that's pretty accurate. I personally like the 77427 because while there are people out there with surface radiotherapy machines, that code is pretty unique to us. But so, yeah, I actually, it's better than I thought, to be honest with you, because I agree. All right, so that's the other part with this. So if you really dig into the methods of that, the way they write what they did is concerning in that I think, so they basically said they recorded the 5,011 NPIs that showed up in 2019, but they explicitly state that if an NPI appeared in the commercial database after 2019, that they did not count it. So what that means is if you showed up, because again, think about the dates they had these databases. So if an NPI billed Medicare in 2018 and then did not bill Medicare in 2019, but started billing in the independent commercial claims in 2020, they did not count it. So that was a permanent exit, meaning if you went on let's say, parental leave for a year, this analysis basically said, no, you permanently exited the workforce forever. But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things with doing this you're right, of new physicians, organizational billing, the problems with taxonomy. And I know I tweeted last night about a few people have looked at the accuracy of the taxonomy and it's 40 to 60% wrong. And I do think the 5,011, I think that's...
I will say this, just to double check you told me 4.
Yes.
I just checked 2020 data and I'm counting 31 group NPIs.
And that's the taxonomy?
Yep.
Yeah, this is the main warning is if you're using the Medicare data, don't use taxonomy for accuracy. It might be, or for precision, accuracy, precision, arrows in a bullseye. So that's my concern as well. And that's why I liked that CPT grouping. Because if you do a single CPT or if you do a single taxonomy, there's all this thing. But if you have 5 CPT code algorithmic searches, you do ameliorate that somewhat, but it's still not perfect. But that's the problem with searching claims data, because then we're making a huge assumption that the workforce only matters if you are clinically active. So I think we've all been a part of departments where there's people who do not see patients, but they draw a salary from departmental funds. So by doing this, you are potentially only capturing clinically active physicians and missing either like erroneous taxonomy coding or people who are counted in the expenses of a department but don't bill. But that's for another day.
So if we think just based on their own narrative that they put and what you guys have said and the other authors of other studies, how do you think they got from 5,000 to 5,200 down to 4,700? What do you think happened there?
So yeah, that was really haunting me, and it took quite a while for me to figure out. So yeah, the methods showed 5,000 to 5,100-ish. The body of the ASTRO paper said 4,718. And so finally, when I went into this Excel tool from the ASTRO blog, which is confusing, but if you really look at it, none of those numbers are actually real for 2019. What they actually have is 4,691 radiation oncologists in 2019. That number does not show up anywhere. And so then I could not figure out for the life of me now we're not even internally consistent. Eventually, if you look at this Excel file, and Excel, my PhD is actually in Excel and PowerPoint, so this is bringing up a lot of buried memories for me. So when you look at Excel files, you can see in the formula bar, is it a formula, is it a value? Excel is a very versatile tool. If you click on the cell that holds that 4,691, you realize it's a formula. So it's not even a real number per se. So they did all this work, like very thorough work to cross-check and verify that 2019 data. And we can debate the accuracy of that 5,000 to 5,100 number till the end of time, but it was very thorough. And then they completely discarded it, and you basically backtrack it. And what you realize is that they manually entered guesses for entrance and exits from 2015 on. And then the only number that was typed in was they entered 4,424 radiation oncologists in 2015. So that 4,691 is basically a formula of adding and subtracting entrance and exits for the past 5 years, completely negating all that methodology, because the Stratus, so that cross-checking, they didn't cross-check anything in that. And if you go into 2015 Medicare data, that 4,424 number doesn't make any sense. Everything else aside.
Where do you think that 4,400 number came from?
I don't even have a guess, to be honest with you. I do not know.
I didn't see a reference anywhere in the paper about it or the document from HMA either.
I think they're trying to get it from Medicare only.
Yeah, if any of us would have. Todd, is that on the tip of your tongue there?
If I have 2014 Medicare numbers, I measure 4,364.
So that's assuming just a slight increase. Yeah. So that's the taxonomy billing?
Yes.
Okay. So if you search just the taxonomy, and so it's interesting because one of the years, I think it is 2019, if you just search for the taxonomy, meaning a physician codes themselves as a radiation oncologist, it estimates the true number of us by several hundred. So it's 4,600 in 2019. But yeah, so I think that's the thing, is this kind of set off a lot of red flags for me for why would you very thoroughly kind of document and go through, like that Stratisand database, that's not a cheap database. Like, so you get this independent database, you cross-reference it, you basically focus all your energy and effort on 2019, that logically makes sense. And then you completely throw it out the window and you just input a number from 2015, which you don't mention anywhere in any of the methods. You don't really tell ASTRO about either. And then all of the subsequent data, every bit of this model, anything else you want to talk about, it rests on 4,424 radiation oncologists in 2015, period. And that's just I would not hang my hat on that.
Yeah, even ASTRO on their own website say that there were 5,000 radiation oncologists in 2015.
Yep.
So figure that.
I think, because that's pretty consistently, if you look throughout all publicly available things, so if you look at CMS, AAMC, ASTRO, ASCO Post, ABMS, ABR, all these things, I would say pretty consistently, most conservatively, I would say there are at least 5,000 radiation oncologists in America in 2019. That's very conservatively. I personally think the AAMC number is more accurate. So AAMC, the physician master file, whether or not people realize this, we're all included in that. You have to opt out, so you're by default included in that. Spoiler alert. But so, that physician master file breaks down not only just the total number, but also the people who are active in patient care. So you can literally see, and the AAMC data goes back to 2008, it very consistently always shows 400 to 500 more total radiation oncologists than those that are actively billing, who are actively seeing patients. I think that if you go, AAMC has 5,306 physicians in 2019 and have about 4,800 of those actively seeing patients, but anyway, I think that's the main take home, is that it's at least 5,000 to 5,300 in 2019, but this whole model, it doesn't matter. That debate, we can't even have that debate because this takes it away from us, where the model is built on 4,424 in 2015.
So we're still talking about supply, not yet necessarily the demand. And so that's the first, I think, problematic issue with this paper, is the initial starting point on supply. And then the calculus of the velocity of how that supply changes over time, that's problematic too.
Just a second, before we move to the exit and entries, if you say our floor of your estimates and what everyone else is saying is about 5,000, that would be the floor?
In 2019.
In 2019, yeah.
Yep.
So
or years later after that now.
Yeah, no, okay, I was just saying. And the number it used was 4,700, correct? 46.
That's right.
So it's about, just for the relative rates, it's about an 8%. It's off by about 8% at minimum. If you consider 5,000 as the floor.
Yep.
Which doesn't sound like a shootable offense, but be that as it may, I think we're after accuracy here.
I think we stopped shooting people after Galileo, but if you really think about it, for these sort of population economic modeling, what they essentially did, and this is talked about in the ASTRO Workforce, is that by their own methods, the range is 4,700 to 5,600. The logical thing would be to put a range in there, to pick something in the middle, to put, I don't know, like a confidence interval, things that we would never accept this in like any of our clinical data. But instead of even doing that, they picked the very bottom of the range, actually below the bottom of the range, the very bottom of the range for supply. It's
I don't see how it could be the bottom of the range. I really feel like it's outside the range, even though the 8% number sounds, the 8% number doesn't sound bad when you compare it versus 5,000. I've taken my own stab at calculating a confidence interval from just 4 or 5 data sources in the past. And I really do feel like 4,700 would, even in that situation, be more than 2 standard deviations away from anything I've ever calculated.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So, and then the question that becomes, all right, can we be, it's so funky because of the way that this model is done to try to modulate how, with the 2019 number, the question becomes, if you take all their same assumptions, and I disagree with the 10,000 WRVUs average, I think it is 8,500, but what is the real projected oversupply? And
now you've got to talk about what their entry and exit. That's the other key part in the spreadsheet.
Which is I think, and again, anyone can go download these things and look for themselves. So this has been a big mystery, and Todd and I in particular have kind of looked at this, and there's been a couple ASTRO conference posters. There's never been like a really big paper on it. The exits of our specialty is a mystery because there's clinical exit and then there's total exit. The entrants are also somewhat of a mystery. So what you can do is back calculate NRMP data. So we know how many people match per year. And I think we have a pretty strong record of people completing. Once you go into RadOnc residency, there's not a lot of people who don't complete it. So it's almost a 1-to-1. But then you also have to factor in like foreign medical grads coming in. And so the AAMC data does have some of this, but you can cross-check the AAMC data with the NRMP data, with the ABI, the board kind of data. And you can basically see yearly, it's between, I would say, 200 and 250 entrants per year. And that can also be seen in the CMS data. And then you can back calculate exits. So I think Todd and I know I tweeted a different number. I would say very generously would say 120. I think for the past couple of days I've been doing this, I keep getting closer to 80, I would say, exits per year. And actually in some years it's less. So that 80 to 90 is like clinically active. I actually think like more people linger in the specialty in general. So that's what and I know you came in, I think, with a similar number, but I would say 80 to 120 is my range for exits, which is not what the Excel file shows.
Yeah, and I've never seen any data whatsoever to say that the range is outside of 80 to 120 exits per year before this workforce analysis came out. And of course, guess which side on the 80 or the 120 it was. And even
What side was it?
it was like super high exit side. People can't wait to get out of radiation oncology, it looks like, according to this workforce analysis, or they're dying, or we're just unhealthy, or we're all getting rich and retiring early. And if you think about it, even back in the days where we were producing 100 residents a year, the specialty was still growing. You were still adding radiation oncologists at 100 a year.
There's a paper from the early 2000s, and this has been confirmed, so it was about a 20 to 25% growth from 1996 to 2003.
Yeah, so even at 100 a year, so if you take the workforce analysis paper, and I'm going to cut to the chase on what the workforce analysis is assuming, it's like they're assuming like 4718 in 2019, and then it's going to be like rise up to about 5,070 by 2030. So you're talking about a net increase of roughly 30 radiation oncologists nationwide per year. So if we cut from our current level back to previous levels, then we would shrink. But we don't have any data that even at 100 residents a year, we would shrink. So it becomes a reductio ad absurdum. And that was my second red flag in the paper, that the rise rate of radiation oncologists is just ridiculously.
I think for me, out of all of this, and it's obvious to a degree, if you look at 2019, they are assuming perfect equilibrium of entrance and exit starting in 2019. There's this kind of slow, it's like a oscillating sort of sine wave here. So for 2015, not only do they have that 44-24 total, in 2015, they have 251 entrants, which makes no sense because you got to backtrack. So if you look, and I'll have to pull up the numbers here, in looking at so 2015, you would go back to the 2010 match. I have this here from the NRMP match data. So in 2010, there was 157 people who matched into the specialty, which was the lowest it's been in the past 10 years. It all jumps up. So if you go back, you can also calculate the number of foreign medical grads that are part of the total physician workforce, and it ranges between 12 and 16%. There's no way we had 251 entrants in 2015, and then it dropped. So, so this is the crazy thing is, so we all know and have been talking about for years now that there's been a steady increase in the number of radiation oncology residents, but not according to this worksheet analysis where it actually drops. So the entrants go from 251 in 2015 down to 191 in 2018, and then somehow just up to 196 in 2019. But more interestingly, the exits perfectly match. So the entrants are 196 in 2019, and the exits are 196 in 2019. And that's what's modeled. So not only is it so far outside the range that any other data source has, it's perfect equilibrium. That doesn't exist in nature. It's just beyond illogical.
And remind me, Jason, are these typed in numbers or are they equations again?
So these are typed in. So yeah, the total workforce is a formula based on the typed in entrance and exit, and nowhere in the methods, and I spent a long time looking to see if they clarify where this came from. These numbers are not. So there's this very murky sort of discussion about anchor-based birth dates and 28 years old because you assume the average medical school matriculant is 24 in 2019. It's all this work on 2019 again, but then that's completely thrown out the window. Yeah.
And then also remind me, Jason, I know you showed me the spreadsheet just a minute ago. What were exits in 2015? We know what they were in 2019, just the raw number of exits.
Are you talking about the calculated or the AAMC data?
I'm talking about the ASTRO Workforce spreadsheet.
The ASTRO Workforce spreadsheet, we have so many things. So they have 147 exits in 2015.
And 251 entrants?
Correct.
Okay. So for some reason, if you have 147 exits in 2015 that jump up to 196 in 2019, that is a statistically significant difference. I don't need to bribe a statistician to tell me that's going to be a p-value of less than 0.05. So not only is the workforce analysis assuming that we're going to have somewhat of an equilibrium, the workforce analysis tells us that we have had a drastic increase in radiation oncology exits between 2015 and 2019, without mentioning that and without giving us any rationale for that. And then on top of that, as you said, in 2019, all of a sudden we hit perfect equilibrium where the number of new RadOncs per year equals the number of exits per year. We have never seen that in this specialty before. In terms of, we got two problems here. We got problems with their number of radiation oncologists per year, and we have problems with the entrance and exit analysis. I vote that their entrance and exit numbers are more wrong than their radiation oncology.
I would that
For past 2019, are the exit and entry numbers values or are they formulas?
So that's where it gets murky. If you look at this, they kind of extrapolate. So yeah, from that's where it's only granular. So they have granular columns for each year. I believe it is a formula essentially, but they don't have the granular input here.
So that's just, this is some sort of projection that's not being referenced.
What is entrance and exits for 2025, Jason?
So they have sum totaled it up here. So they're showing, so basically they're saying from 2021 to 2025, 983 entrants, and from 2020 through 2024, 792 exits. So I haven't even tried to dig into this because it is just utterly perplexing to me. But Todd, what you just said is significant. I didn't even realize because, you know, I think one of the things that even the three of us who would probably be labeled oversupply advocates, as it were, have recognized that the job market for the past year or two has been insane. I obviously that's part of the reason I fell off the map for a little bit as I came over to Vermont. And so when you crank out the AAMC data, so this is what I was doing right before we hopped on this, is that the increase in exits, because the AAMC data now has up to 2021, so you can actually see the change from 2019 to 2021, and it is the least growth in the specialty we've ever had. And you basically can estimate 150 exits, and there's a different think tank has done some other stuff about this. I think I would personally estimate that normally, pre-COVID, we had 80 to 120 exits per year. And then recently with COVID, it's been up to maybe around 150, 160. And we've all felt that. That's the thing, is we have felt that. We've seen it in real time, what even just, quote unquote, just a change of 50 more exits have done for us. And so this model is showing 50 more exits from 2015 to 2019, which I think would have changed the entire zeitgeist of the conversation if that were true.
Yep, I agree with that.
So guys, without getting into the other issues we've talked about, the demand, the created demand by multiplying RVUs by a number of doctors, without getting into multiple other things, including the lack of technical revenue, ignoring SBRT and SRT and SRS, let's play with the model a little bit. See what happens when we change some of the underlying assumptions to reflect the reality of
performance.
Yeah. And I've been trying, that is a difficult, because of the way this model is built, that is a difficult prospect. So what I wanted to do was see, all right, if we don't change any of their assumptions, if the only thing you do is put in a more reasonable number for the 2019 workforce, which in my mind would be about 5,100, then what happens? So changing nothing else, the oversupply estimate by 2030 hits 200. It's about 206.
206 versus what?
I think they said 20. So that's why everything is about the balance. It basically goes 10x.
But what is the oversupply number and what's the perfect number?
Let me see. See, now this is where it gets really confusing. Oh yeah. So, well, it gets more terrifying if you don't keep all their assumptions. So the perfect number would be, wait, let me just make sure. Oh no, see, this is what happens when you have 3 screens. And
I want to say that probably their 57 number for 2030 is probably the perfect number.
So if you look at the raw kind of stuff, so 10,000 RVUs a year with all the other stuff they invoke, I think 5,057 is the perfect number-ish. And then if you make that to 5,100, it goes to it's 206. Yeah. So and as we've noted, by changing nothing else about the tool, the slope that this trend creates, that this model creates, is gentle, to put it mildly. Yeah. So even then, if you, by only changing 2019 to be 5,100 instead of 4,691, even with that incredibly gentle slope, you get up to 206. And then, so if you, it was actually kind of shocking. So if really all you do is basically put 5,100 in for 2019, if you just click 8,500 WRVUs for 2019, which I think is a very reasonable, and then you basically just say that the RVU trend is more reasonable or whatnot, you can see like 1,000 to 1,500 as an oversupply in 2030. Okay. And that's only changed a little bit.
And let's just do I keep things simple. I really do, believe it or not.
I believe it.
All of my data says, let's just say, I don't know, let's say 5,300 RadOncs in America today and 2,300. And you rise at 100 a year. That seems reasonable to have 100 new RadOncs a year. I don't think anyone's going to pillory for me for that number.
Yeah,
so then by 2030, we're going to be at 6,000. If we're starting at 5,500 today, which that would be the extrapolated number from the geographic workforce data from Bates, and I think Dr. Chowdhury co-authored that too, then we would be at over 6,000 in 2030. And if you put those numbers in, it's not looking good. If you put people would have to admit that's within a reasonable confidence interval, that those numbers are 100 new RadOncs a year, and you start at 5,300 or 5,500 now. Those are within a reasonable confidence interval. They're the high side of the confidence interval, I may grant you that, but it's within a reasonable confidence interval.
And I think that is an incredibly reasonable assumption. Like, really, if you just assume 100 new RadOncs a year, which is in line with historical data, even for me to just plug that into the tool and changing nothing else, you can't, to see an oversupply estimate of 1,000, of more than 1,000 is shocking. But if all the other assumptions of this tool are correct, then that's the number, I guess.
Haven't we said that? Didn't we say 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that we're going to be oversupplied by 1,000 RadOncs?
I mentally can't even wrap my head around that, man. I just know there's too many, and I don't even want to hear it said out loud or read it. It is painful. But yeah.
I'm going to spend just a minute on the demand and the RVU. I've changed jobs a lot, and I've interviewed a lot.
What?
And yeah, I know it's a surprise to many. From about 2016 to last year, I would say one of my part-time jobs was looking for a job. And I will tell you, every single contract during that span mentioned a median RVU rate of somewhere between 8,800 and 9,000. Every single contract says that. And your pay was calculated by somewhere between $45 and $60 an RVU. The median salary is always reported as just about $520 to $540 until the most recent one. So that's in line. I mean, this jives, the idea of somewhere between 8,500 and 9,000 RVU. If you read the narrative, it says that's the number they got, but it doesn't sound right. So
the methods are amazing. Everyone should go read the narrative method.
And so I think that part, that's a big part of this too. And I want to spend more time on demand because I had a little tweet on on how you calculate demand. I think there's a misunderstanding about this, a significant misunderstanding of how we should have calculated demand. What they did is somewhat useful if you were doing something retro, if you were looking backwards in time, but it does not work for future at all. In that it's making this analysis very hard to do it that way because you're not reflecting the reality of the range of practice that people have. Guys, what else? What else we got here?
Again, just in my mind, when I first started thinking about this, for me, I guess what would it be? Denominator. No, wait, it's the numerator.
I don't even try. I can never keep that straight. That's bold of you to try.
Yeah, it's the numerator. Demand is the numerator. The RadOncs are the denominator. For me, when I'm thinking about the numerator, for me, it's mostly been thinking about the number of new starts per year. It seemed like that was always a reasonable thing to try and wrap your mind around. But in other words, the number of new consults per year, assuming that you're an awesome RadOnc and you can convert every consult to a treated patient. And there is no data that raw number, the number of patients starting radiation therapy per year, there is no data to show that is increasing over time. And that has been concerning to me. And I look for that data. I had ASTRO in 2003 said that we have 1.2 million people a year getting radiation therapy in the United States. And then independent business third-party analysts say right now we're at 1.1 million a year. So over the last 2 decades, we've held very steady on the number of patients starting radiation therapy per year. Yeah, they're getting more complex, IMRT, SBRT, SRS, but that's the other thing I wish we were looking at. And anecdote time, I can remember back when I was a medical student and a resident, just the departments felt very much busier. There were constantly people in this. I never really counted on Beam or anything like that, but you were very busy. Of course, it was an academic department and that sort of thing. But no one has looked at, if you just look at the RVU, as someone so eloquently pointed out on Twitter, it can lead you down the primrose path toward a mistake, I think.
It's tilting at windmills. And I can just say from my job switches and having access to kind of information from multiple different hospitals across states, that the 8,500 number is incredibly accurate. And if you crunch the numbers, so it's really hard. And this is why just ignoring SBRT is a very interesting choice, because this varies widely. And if you're starting 100 gamma knife patients per year, it's very different RVUs than if you're starting 100 3D breast patients per year. And I think anyone's firsthand experience can vouch for that. But just for anyone who is wondering what a reasonable kind of conversion rate is, because I agree with Todd that new starts is probably the most important. If you are thinking about 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 RVUs a year, that roughly equates with an average case mix. So if you're talking about just an average IMRT and an average 3D with a low SBRT, kind of by my own calculations, that generally translates to about 250 to 290 new starts. But you could easily tip that in multiple directions depending on the modality and multiple other things. For anyone kind of thinking about how does this translate into their own practice, how many new starts do you do per year? How many RVUs do you do per year? And I would not say, even just taking these numbers, I don't think it's reasonable to say that there are close to 5,000 radiation oncologists each averaging 10,000 RVUs a year. That's
possible. It's impossible. And then so let me ask this question. If you think about the 100 new 3D breast patients per year versus the guy who just does 100 gamma knives per year, which doctor is busier?
Yeah. I'm going to back away slowly from the microphone.
I think it's reasonable to say they're equally busy.
Like that.
Am I way off?
I love this debate. This is the debate.
Much different WRVUs, but they're about working the same amount, right?
Yeah, and this is the debate we should be having, and it's sad because we didn't have this taken away from us. Where the question, there was my thing I just tweeted out about the 150% increase in workload because of the increase in complexity. We don't get to have this debate. This debate was taken away from us because we can't even have a foundation to have the debate on. What is the concept of busy? What is the concept of work? What is the concept of a workforce? If somebody's not clinically active, does that mean they're no longer taking a job away from a new grad? I wouldn't even feel like we can have those conversations with the data as they exist.
Yeah, there's also the idea of manufactured demand, and that's follow-ups.
Yeah.
Like, how many follow-ups can you see? And that can range from never seeing them and having a nurse practitioner see them or medical oncology following them to seeing everybody forever. And if anyone's ever taken over another doctor's practice, you may notice that you're seeing breast patients that were treated 15 years ago with stage 1 disease.
Too real, Sybil, too real.
And let me give you firsthand, non-fake news information that there are centers in the United States when they do SBRT now with certain machines that they have in their clinic that gives them kind of the idea that they can do this. And not only are they billing a SBRT treatment code per day, they're billing a 77301 per day, along with that SBRT treatment code. And there's a lot of WRVUs in that 77301.
I think that's 11.9 WRVUs. Not that I have that number memorized, but a 77301 is a little bit, it's like 11.93-ish.
And now you're billing a 77301 per fraction of SBRT. Man, your WRVUs are going to look awesome at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So guys, this is great. So we really focused on the supply here. We touched on the demand aspect of it. What would you guys say to summarize what you found so far, if we're just looking at the demand side of things?
In terms of what reality is or what this model makes reality to be?
Analyze the model with respect to what you guys know and understand with your years of looking at this data. And might I add, neither of you were invited to join the workforce committee.
That's committees, which is actually a blessing. So I think
I lost sleep over it.
Think beyond anything else, because I think that I've heard a lot of excellent arguments about WRVUs and work and things that I may not agree with it. I think it's so much more nebulous that it's hard to refute it. I think the main takeaway for me from this model is that they really underestimated, to put it mildly, the workforce in terms of total radiation oncologists in America, and did so by basically backwards projecting data that we actually can have objective numbers for. So it's one thing to use a model to forecast the future, but it's another to have a model where you forecast the past and it directly contradicts numbers that you yourself, anyone can go verify. And so I think this model, based just on supply alone, grossly underestimates current reality, let alone future reality, and definitely past reality.
Agree. Totally agree.
Well, guys, this was great. The next part will be about the demand, and hope you guys have a great weekend.
We'll rest up.
Thank you. See you guys.
This has been a Photon Media production. Don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to us. Be well and beam on.